You got it.
Awesome. So we're going to get started now. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. So I just want to take a moment to say that this event is being recorded, and to access recordings of past talks we posted, you can go to the Arts Collective page on the Howard Center website. So we've held these virtual artist talks all last year, and we're resuming the series on a bi-monthly basis in 2022. And our next talk will be with John Kalaki. So now I want to introduce our guest artist, Rob Mullen. Rob is a Vermont-based artist who has been drawing his whole life. As a kid, he took interest in the critters and habitats of the Vermont shoreline and followed that interest to a degree in biology, which naturally led to biological illustration. He spent 16 years as a freelance advertising artist in New York City before returning to Vermont, where he began his career as a wildlife artist. Rob spent many years on the national show circuit while engaging in wilderness art expeditions. These days, his wilderness expeditions have gotten a little closer to home. And we're really excited to have him with us today. So thank you so much for coming, Rob. And I'm going to hand it off to you now.
Oh, great. And we have an extra audience member too. So it'll be more pressure. Okay. Just as a start, my name at the top of the screen here is, I didn't become an artist out of a total vacuum, even though basically it was my illustrations in labs as a biology student that got me started as an artist. But my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, was also a lifelong professional artist. He was one of the top lettering artists in the world, and he was based out of New York City for many, many years. He was still working when I left college, and so when I started apprenticing with him for a short while, and when I went down to, I would love the story if I left, with $250 and showed up in New York City with my Datsun B210 to become an artist, which is essentially true. But I did have a grandfather living in town, so I wasn't completely on my own. The type that my name is written in the screen is a typeface that's still in use today. I think he designed it about 1953. It is the first typeface in script that was usable as a typeface, because he designed it so every letter could join every other letter as much as possible. So typesetters could use it and set up a script. And it's great for advertising, which is what it was mostly used for. It's still available, and just as a nod to Gramps, I've used it for some of the presentations here. Paint and Paddle Studio is my own lettering. That's canoe and caribou unseal. You can see the caribou antler motif and a lot of the curves. It's an unsealed Irish script, and the canoes are in some like these straight elements here. I have like a little bit of canoe thing like the eye. So anyway, that's canoe and caribou unseal. I designed that very fast. It's not a big deal, but anyway, this is the logo from my studio. This alludes to my Paint and Paddle studio and the travels that I do, which is the Compass Rosette. I'm represented by Robert Paul Gallery in Stowe in Vermont. So this is the painting part. This is Alaska artist Bill Brody and I up in Alaska on a big expedition a few years ago in 2012. And this is the paddling part. I've been an avid canoeist since I was a kid. Taught myself whitewater as a teenager. I've run up to grade 4, which out of the grade 6, there's an international scale is a grade 6 scale. So I've run grade 4 in open canoe. And I'm generally considered a fairly notable open canoeist in North America. I started drawing, as I think the intro mentioned, very young. This is 18 months old in February of 1958. This is a Dalmatian dog. This is a boy of long arms. And I actually remember drawing this. I was very proud of it. This is a storm down at the bottom. I just scribbled. It was my first impressionistic work. So I only throw this in because the adventure travel I do is very athletic, and I really like the athletic aspect to it. I love a tough trip. A lot of our trips aren't. We take a lot of other people on them. but I personally like a lot of physical challenge in a journey. This is from high school. This was the start of the mile on the left. There were 10 people on the line, and this is the finish, and there's nobody else in sight behind. This is Carl Boss from Mount Abe. I beat him, as you can see. I did do a lot of illustrations for professors at UVM, fossil foraminifera, slime mold sporangia. I did muscle scar analysis and reconstructions for morphology, anatomy professors. This is one of a series of aquatic hemipterans I did for the Zoo Museum. Whole series on, I did hundreds of pieces for professors. And it was from that work that they suggested I go into art. So often to New York I went, and this is my first apartment on 240 West 26th Street. I went back a few years later. A friend of mine who owned this holographic studio is still there. This was my longest, the 2 West, you can see right there, 2 West 46th Street, just off 5th Avenue. This is where I worked for most of my career. Fantastic location. The New York City Police Department's bagpipe band would warm up right under my window for St. Patrick's Day parade. This 5th Avenue dollar store was a Brown art store when I was there. So you couldn't get more convenient. I'd run out of something up here in the studio, I'd run down here to the art store, and I was back up there in 10 minutes. It was a real art store. They had everything. So it was fantastic. And the work I did, the Chrysler thing was just like just one of those low end jobs. I did every major cigarette in the country, every Camel, Winston, or Newport ad you saw in the 80s, I did it. I did all the cigarettes, I did all the booze, I did Estee Lauder, I did Revlon, and Elizabeth Arden exclusively to them, even outside of the agencies. So like I said, I was the top lettering artist in the city for some of the 80s. The end of my career, this was it. This was the, you would think the top of your career is the biggest media event in the world, but it was designed on computer. They only needed me to be the monkey with the hands to kind of render it for camera. It was a terrible, in my opinion, terrible design done by the art director. They had computers, they could do it themselves, and they did this. So I could see the handwriting was on the wall. The 2 greatest things I created while I was in New York are right here. It's my daughters, Lena and Katie. And also while I was in New York, because I'd grown up canoeing and I loved it, New York, I liked New York, I really did, but I needed to get out once in a while. I started going on a wilderness canoe trips when I was 30, turning 30, I was 29 in this picture here. I had a kid, a brownstone, I'm married, and I was thinking I was going to turn into an old married toad. So my brother and I, was just a year behind me, we decided we were going on a big wilderness trip up in Ontario, where he was born. And so we were going to go on the Mississippi River. This is my dad. He ended up going, Frank couldn't. And I went every year. Every summer I do a big wilderness trip up in Canada for the rest of my time in New York. And then there was the transition to get out. Like I said, I'd seen the handwriting on the wall with that Super Bowl job. I started doing wildlife art shows in the New York and New Jersey area and up in Vermont in 1990. I had enough work together to apply to this Southern Maryland Wildlife Art Show in 1992. It was a major national level show. It had John Siri Lester in it. He was a big time painter from England who lived in America. It had Carl Brenders from Belgium and Robert Bateman. Basically, the top cream of the crop of wildlife artists in the world were in this show. And I applied to it and I got in and I was very happy. And then they sent me a letter that I wasn't in, which wouldn't make me happy. But at that point, I'd been in New York for 16 years and I dealt with some really tough clients. And I wasn't going to take that lying down. So I sent them a letter back telling them that they had given me, I had, put out professional expectations that I was going to be in this show, and it was going to cause me great harm to turn around and say I wasn't in the show. So if they didn't honor the original, I was going to sue them. It's an unusual way to get into an art show, but they relented and let me in. So I met John Siri Lester, and a big star of the show, and he basically took me under his arm, and he became something of a mentor to me on wildlife painting. I went to 2 of his seminars. At that point, I left New York and came back to Vermont. I won the Vermont and New York State duck stamp competitions that year. It was 1995. I was 9th in the federal. And from that, John sent me an invitation to the Florida Wildlife Expo for 1995. Big national show. I ended up doing that for many years. But the first year I came under John's wing. And that's me winning the duck stamp with here in Vermont. I look very happy. As you can imagine, your whole 16-year career falls apart due to computers. You moved to Vermont. You've got at that point 2 children, a mortgage, and your career is in tatters. I was not a happy camper. I was under a lot of stress. But while I was at that Florida Wildlife Show, what happened after the show is I got to meet a lot of artists, became really a lot of my lifelong friends now. I met them at this show. And it's a small group that does wildlife art professionally, full time. And we're a very tight knit group of people. And I heard about this a fantastic show they said I should try for. It was the Arts for the Parks. And it has a big national tour, and it's run by the National Parks Arts Foundation. It was the richest art prize in the world at the time. And so while I was down in Florida, I went out bird watching. I got some nice reference, and I did this painting of a skimmer, and I submitted it. And at the time, they were getting 4,000 to 5,000 entries around the world for the show, and they only took 100. It was called the Top 100 show. Incredibly difficult to get into, and I got into it on the first try. I was very excited, and I got into it for 6 years in a row, which was really it established me as a nationally known artist. This was really the leg up I needed. Sales were good, and this was an interesting painting. It was one of the award winners. It won the Waterfowl Award of all things one year, and before I submitted it to Arts for the Parks, I had it down at the Florida Wildlife Art Show, and an example of what my art schooling was hanging around with artists at shows. If you're hanging around with really, really good painters, they're going to teach you. You're going to learn from them incredibly. This little piece of reed wasn't there in the original painting. And if you imagine it without that, this painting kind of breaks in half like this. And I had it hanging on the show, and this friend of mine, Heiner Hertling, walks up, and he's got a very thick German accent. He's going, "Hey, Rob, those are 2 beautiful paintings." I said, well, and I said, yeah, I kind of was wondering about that. I don't know what to do to fix it. He goes, you know what you do? You take these reeds, you put one right over here, pull your eye over, and it unites the whole piece. It took 10 minutes to put that in, and it turned it from a painting with potential, and it turned it into a painting, and an award-winning piece at that. So that's the kind of learning I did. We hung around, and that show opened, that Arts of the Park show opened at Grand Teton Lodge and Lake Jackson Lake Lodge in Grand Teton. And because you're right there at Yellowstone, Grand Teton, we'd hang around in Grand Teton and Yellowstone for about 2 weeks and get a lot of reference and do a lot of painting. I also started doing all my plein air painting out there, and all sorts of stuff. And then back to Florida. That was my basic, we would travel the country doing shows, stopping at national wildlife refuges. We're never much far from the car, and I was getting a little frustrated with that. But the reference was great. I mean, these wildlife refuges, the animals would hang around and let you shoot them. And this is at Cape Hatteras. And I did a lot of shorebirds, and I did very well in Arts of the Parks with birds. This was the best of show at the Pack Rim show in Seattle, Washington in '99. I played around with hiding things in plain sight, like a big egret sitting here, hidden with the shadow patterns on it. something I kind of liked. This struck me as that these animals, they just look like dinosaurs to me. That's why I called it Timeless Coast. This was the off the coast of California near Santa Barbara. This is the Channel Islands. I kayaked around and got almost swamped by, it was actually quite dangerous, as I found out later. The sea lions can be quite aggressive if you're not careful. So happily I kind of figured out that the big ones you wanted to stay away from. The teenagers would come and play with me in the boat, which was very exciting. But at that point, like I said, I was frustrated with the road travel I was doing. I was putting, probably 12, 15,000 miles on a year going across the country, doing shows. I felt more like a teamster than an artist. So I decided I was going to go on a canoe trip again. That Mississippi River I mentioned runs right here to James Bay. And so I decided to do all the way. I'd never made it all the way to James Bay when I was paddling out of New York. So I decided to do a big art trip. I was going to do it from here to there. I was going to do it by myself. It was going to be very macho and very exciting. And then another artist, John Pitcher, asked to join me. So I ended up with company for part of it. And he came for the first 130 miles. We both did this painting. I couldn't find his to put it in, but we both did this falls. It was great. We did an art show afterwards, and we only found out we'd done the same painting at the show. And it turned out that viewers love that, seeing artists do their different takes on the same thing. And so I've used that as, I've taken that lesson in doing group shows from wilderness trips. I've told artists, nobody owns an image. If you want to paint, you two of you come up on the same thing, you both worked hard to get there, paint it. You'll paint it differently, and the audiences will love it. John had to leave due to an injury at the last road crossing on the river on the way to James Bay, and I had to continue alone. And the first night out, this was one of the most interesting paintings I've done, not because of the painting itself. This is a field painting, plein air, you might call it, done actually on the site and not touched in the studio afterwards. I was feeling horribly lonely the first night. I was by myself and going into really deep wilderness. This is, there are no roads between here, that part of Canada and Russia. So anyway, I was totally alone and feeling pretty down. And as I started painting, I actually got euphoric. It was a weird experience, all I can say. It just made me feel connected to everybody, because I guess that's how I connect to people I paint. This was a few days later at a gorge. That's me working on, you can see the corner of the painting, that's the painting. And that's the painting I did while I was sitting there. And then I turned around because it's a gorge. I did that painting. And then I continued on paddling down through the gorge. This is a studio piece I did of that gorge after I got home. And I put that together from a bass I was fishing for. I let him go. I ate some walleyes, but I didn't take the bass. This is a bear who gave me some trouble on the river. I was totally unarmed. Happily, he went about his business. But I called it Trouble Brewing. And towards the end of the trip, this was, unbeknownst to me, this was my dawn of September 11th, 2001, because this was 2001 was the trip. I'd gone through a 4-day gale and was really feeling kind of like, I can't wait till this trip's over. When I saw the light of the silence of no rain, and then I saw the light through the tent wall, and I came running out to get a shot of the sunrise. And there were 3 sandhill cranes right by my canoe. It was one of the most magical moments I've ever had in the bush. And this was the field painting I've been doing the night. I paddled 31 miles that day, and I came to the end of the Mississippi River, which is right here on Portage Island. This is the evening of September 11th. And that's the field painting I was doing while I was feeding peanuts to the gray jays. And I did this studio piece from it when I got home. And then I took off to Africa. I did a show. Collector had asked if he wanted to get some African paintings from me. I told him I don't paint African. He asked why not. I said, never been there. I said, do you want to go? You got to love rich collectors. So he squared me through Africa for 2 weeks. It was grand fun. I sold over 50 paintings for several years. Everything I painted in Africa was sold. if I had any brains as a businessman, I would have just kept painting Africa, because that's how most wildlife artists make a living. I, however, was in love with the boreal forest north, the northern wilderness. So I just kept going back, and this is the boreal, a little bit of boreal forest in California, even the Kalia River, otters. This is a theme I've tried to bring to a lot of my paintings, is to incorporate something about natural history in the composition. It's alluded to in this title, which is River Sculptures, and it's just repeat forms. You can see the sinuous forms in the rocks and the sinuous forms in the otters are both the result of the river. This through evolution, these through erosion. This was a solo trip up. I kept going with this Canadian thing. I got into trouble on a river, the Harricana River in Quebec. I went too late. It was October, but I did meet a pack of wolves and a couple lynx up here, and I got some nice artwork out of it. I had to turn around and abandon this trip and go back to where I put in, and it led to a great adventure getting out of the bush. But everything's an adventure, even though the trip, as far as a canoe trip went, was kind of a bust. As an experience, it was absolutely wonderful. Snowy plein air painting of the Mississippi River in 2003. We're testing a trip out for taking some big stars on it in the next year. At this point, I'd gotten a lot of other artists coming with me now, not a lot, but here's two of them, and they're goofing around. This is in 2004, a trip up on the Chapleau River. And this was a human acclimated wolf. And that was one of the paintings I got off of that trip. I was going down for breakfast water when I met the bull. After the 2004 trip, I had contacted the Smithsonian Institution about doing a exhibition on this boreal forest, the northern wilderness, combining art, science, and adventure. They added in indigenous views because they were anthropologists, and they suggested some pretty expensive trips where you need float planes like the George River. So I formed up the Wilderness River Expedition Art Fellowship. We're now at the Center for Circumpolar Studies, and we're a 501c3, which does really ease funding because I have to afford these things, and they're not cheap. But you get up into these far northern regions, the animals don't even know what people are. I mean, this bear was a mama bear. She had 2 cubs with her, and she sat there and posed for us for 20 minutes. We left her. I mean, how often does a wildlife artist leave a subject like that? So that's me on the George River. This is the George River to Ungava Bay. We paddled up to Kanjik-Selujawak, which I'm told by the Inuit I say very well for a white man. And at the end of the trip, you're on estuary. This is the George River estuary heading into Ungava Bay. You camp up here, you paddle, you park your canoe, right? And there's water up to here. You get up in the morning and it's 200 yards away because the tide's out. So you have to walk through these mud holes with your gear and your boats to launch. And we lost a 6'2" guy in one of those mud holes. He went up to his chest. We did get him out. This is the mayor of Kanjik-Selujawak at the end of the trip. Because we're working with the Smithsonian at this point, we did get involved with a lot of native issues, but I'm not going to get into those in this trip. This is Dr. Stephen Loring, who over the years has become a very, very good friend of mine. He is one of the leading authorities on northern cultures in the world, and he works at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. And he's come on trips with me for now over, it's almost 15, 16, 17 years, since 2004. This was our big trip on the George. This is Robert Bateman, for any of you who know, he's like considered generally the top wildlife artist in the world. Came with us on our 2006 trip to, and then this is one of my field paintings at the start of that trip. We did a lot of artwork on this trip. It was designed. We did the 2005 trip was a recon of the George River. That's why we went all the way to Ungava Bay to make sure we didn't kill Bob Bateman. We didn't want to kill the top wildlife artist in the world on some crazy ass trip. So we reconned it. And when we planned out the 2006 trip, we planned it carefully so that we get a lot of painting done. We actually only did 135 miles in 18 days, and 11 of those days were ashore. So we did a lot of artwork. And I do, my favorite field technique is to use ballpoint pen, and this was all in the log book, so there's all sorts of notes in it. This is the Falco's River again. That last one is from up on high. This was down at river level near our camp. This was a day in camp because it was snowing and one of our crew had bronchitis. So we stayed there 3 days, I think. And this is how you attract caribou. See the caribou you can see the caribou on the point. You put your hands in the air, they think they're antlers and they come up very close to you. You'll see caribou photos later, you won't believe. And this technique, all these people who sneak around trying to sneak up on the caribou, they think you're a wolf and they run. If you just stand up and pretend you're a caribou, they'll walk right up to you. It's absolutely nuts. This is an example of why you wear a bug shirt up in that area. These are all black flies in the crease of my sketchbook. And I closed the book and killed several dozen of them. This is the Falls of the Nanticoke River. Again, ballpoint pen because it doesn't smudge. That's why I like to use it. I told you the animals don't know what you are. So this squirrel was so curious about me. He wouldn't leave me alone, so I promised I'd paint him. I painted him twice. And and then I came back to camp. This little baby porcupine was in camp, so did him. That's on the George River. That's this buddy, John Pitcher, who came with me on the first of these art trips in 2001. He's been on several since, one of my best friends now. And fantastic. He's got guts. He'd never been whitewater canoeing, and look at him go. This was a camp. We actually saw this bear leave these tracks. Stephen Lorien had given me a paper he'd just done as we took off on this trip. He'd done documenting grizzly bears in Quebec and Labrador up into the 20th century. You don't think of grizzlies in this part of North America, but there's evidence that Stephen had helped. He had not found the evidence, but he had collated it all together in a paper with a guy named Spice. And they hadn't published it yet, but I got an advance on it. And he showed it to me. And I got to thinking about it as I was watching these black bear tracks. So I did the painting, I changed them to grizzly bear tracks. And grizzly is called a matashu in Innu, the local Innu Indians. So I call it the Passage of Matashu. And there we are, just, some of us hiking up along a fault lake. This is total tundra. You get forest down along there. This is our team doctor coming up. And painting I did from that mountain. We saw 5 golden eagles in one day, so I figured golden eagles had to get painted. I actually had to wait till I went to Mexico to get that reference for that eagle, though. So it's kind of a ballpoint pen of Helen Falls. So this is a mess of us painting at that lake that you saw before. And like I said, art was a big focus of the trip. Did a lot of whitewater though too, so couldn't help that. And this was flying out the end. We didn't go all the way to Ungava Bay with the main trip because we wanted to focus on painting. And the portage around that Helen Falls was a full day, it's 2 miles. And so we flew out from there. And then I went to Mexico. Stephen Lorien invited me to come down with him to the Rio Grande. So I spent Christmas in the bottom of this canyon. It was fantastic. And then he left at the end of Big Bend National Park, and I continued through what's called the lower canyons to the Pecos River. That's about another 150-mile run. I was totally by myself in this kind of countryside. It was awesome. These canyons are 2,000 feet deep, some of them. That was me after the trip. I look like I've been out for 3 weeks. Heading off to Sands. This was a trip we did to help promote the now largest protected expanse of fresh water in the world on Lake Superior. That's my pen and ink of this. I did log books at that time. I don't do them anymore. See our artsy colored boats, all the primary colors there. And there are my boats, my field sketches, the boats in the morning. This was when we beached in the evening rather, and this was in the morning, and you can see the water's actually gone out, and it's Lake Superior. There's no tide per se, but they have what they call a sesh. And it's such a big lake that it actually does have some gravitational effect on water level. Just some nice photos from Lake Superior. Some of my teammates. This is one of the top, this is one of the, she's actually a master artist for Birds and Art. 3 young artists working on Lake Superior. We had a good crew on there. And another young artist on there too. I was a little younger anyway. That's another pen and ink from that trip. And I worked really hard to get that. That's tough getting lightning. And we were invited to go back and do the same trip in the wintertime. I will never do it again. It was horrifically cold. My selfie. That's just as cold as it looks. It was about 30 below zero with a wind blowing. And that's not 30 below wind chill. That's probably an 80 below wind chill. So very nasty conditions. But petroglyphs, that's a painting I did of one of our ice camps. And that's this storm coming in where it was going to have 50-mile-an-hour winds with 30 degree below zero still air temperatures. So actually we had a warning on the weather radio that it was deadly. You should seek shelter. And we did. We ran naked to the storm, but there was a sauna. There's an excuse for that. But there was a sauna. So we took a sauna and we had to fix it first, but ran off into the woods. The next year, actually it was later that year, we went to the Slate Islands to see the smallest and the most isolated herd of caribou in North America. They're on, they don't have any predators, so they're actually quite small and they're tame. This guy actually put his nose on my camera lens. And that's my wife petting him. She did not feed him, but she did pet him. That's the Slate Islands. And then 3 weeks after the Slates, we were off to Labrador to see real caribou. This is here we are in Vermont, right here. Just to give you kind of an orientation, this is Labrador, right here, Ungava Bay, which you'll hear about later. And we were heading to a lake, a meteorite impact crater lake right here. And there's all tundra there, except where this lake, the meteorite crater, creates enough shelter for trees to grow. And it becomes a wildlife magnet because it's a source of food and shelter. And the caribou, when they're migrating, and at the time, the George River herd had recently been up to 1 million head, the largest ungulate herd in the world, does the largest caribou, and they make, and everybody talks about wildebeest. Caribou beat them stupid. The population has crashed since, but that's possibly partly natural. That beer, by the way, it was one of our sponsors for a while. It's excellent beer. As you can see, it's 9% alcohol. We started off with, this is my wife, Bonnie, and she's from Montreal. And this was our crew having a farewell dinner. Most of our big trips came out of Montreal for a while. And we were leaving for Labrador from Montreal. 350 miles of gravel road, good fun. Flying in. There's the airplanes dumped us off. It's called the Banana Strip. It was a curved runway. It was great fun. This is one of the greatest photos I've ever taken. Very lucky shot. And did a painting from it. I did several paintings from it, but this is probably the most successful one. And I told you get caribou in close by putting your hands in the air. This is caribou. We actually had to kind of push them back a little bit there. This guy was starting to paw the ground and getting a little uppity, and it was in the rut. So we didn't want him getting too aggressive because they're big. These animals probably 400 or 500 pounds on this hoof. And the cows were, if anything, worse. They get quite like defensive and, who are you and what do you want? And this guy I played peekaboo with for quite a while. He was trying to get downwind of me to get my scent because he was curious about what I was, because they don't know what people are. They're great. This is I don't do a lot of pencil. This is a pencil piece. And there's a painting of caribou. They've just come across, they've swum this lake. And this Harlequin ducks, I did this piece in the studio. This is from Labrador, the ducks. And this is a known Harlequin duck nesting area. And I was looking at the colors in the water, and I realized that that's why harlequins like it. You see them in the field guides, they always say, oh, it's a garish duck. Well, if you look at the bird in its setting, and this goes back to a theme, I like to put the natural history into the painting, the bird really fits. All of these markings fit with a whitewater habitat. And this is a weird duck. They breed in the rapids, and the hens right here, they actually raise their chicks in the rapids. This is where they stay for the summer. The boys go home they go off to the seacoast. This is Stephen Loring. Like I said, we've done a lot of work with the indigenous populations. And Mad River Canoe was my sponsor for many years, and they donated 2 of these boats for the Innu Nation up in Labrador. And Stephen was driving all the way from Washington, D.C. to Labrador. He's an inveterate, crazy driver. This was his boat, and these are the donation boats he had to pick up here in Vermont that I'd arranged to have them shipped up here. We did a Trans-Labrador trip in '09, and we had a lot of fun, as you can see. It's just as cold as it looks, and it was a fun trip. Had some really crazy whitewater on the trip. It was a long, one of the 2 most difficult and dangerous trips I've ever done. I got some nice art out of it. This one I put in because I thought it was too busy with the clouds, so I did that to it. And I wasn't sure which one works. I still aren't, but some collector has it now, so I don't know. It's too late to do anything about it. We ran out of water on that trip. It was a sure sign of climate change, and we had to spend 9 days portaging across the tundra to find a river with water in it. And we were just doing a map. There's nobody to tell you where to go. We just pulled out our topo map and looking all, there's the Coggalook, it's 15 miles north, but getting across there was tough. This caribou didn't make it. The wolves got him. There were a lot of wolves there. We did see quite a few. This is the Valley of the Coggalook. There it is. We had to get the canoes down that. It was great fun. But the best thing about that trip, we got to Nain, Labrador, and I found a puppy. She was abandoned. She was going to be left to die. It was October, and I smuggled her on board the ship. We were going back to Goose Bay. I was with Cole Johnson, it's an artist from New York. He shot the video. We're on the ship in our berth.
This is Rob's new souvenir from Maine that he picked up in the airport on the way out, like all good tourists do. This is a offspring of some junkyard dog running around town.
Purebred name, Labrador Slow Dog.
Is no such thing. One thing of that statement was correct, and that is that it's a dog. Other than that,
All right, let's move past that if I can. Come on, come on, come on. There we go. There she is. She blended right into the family. She's still here. She'll be 13 this summer, but she's still a sprightly little puppy, very, very active, fantastic dog. And that last one was us heading up to another trip up in Ontario. And we almost got eat. We were supposed to meet up with the Blood Vein tribe of the Anishinaabe for a big thing pushing their World Heritage Site for the UN. And we almost got eaten by a forest fire, so we had to change plans. Couldn't go through Manitoba. And I did this painting. And these, if you may guess, these are the caribou from Labrador. I put them into the Ontario forest fire. But it is Woodland Caribou Provincial Park, so they have plenty of their own caribou. We just didn't happen to see them swimming across the lake. So I have nine ravens in the sky, which is kind of like a Norse thing, but nobody seems to catch that. I did this trip on that Woodland Caribou trip. This is 2011. I did decide to go with pencil, so I just brought pencil instead of my pens. and little field sketches in pencil. Those aren't field sketches. I started doing some local stuff, in between. This is a piece that got picked up by Pumpernickel Press. This is another one. I was invited to do a talk up in Tadoussac, Quebec by our sponsor for those George River trips and the Labrador trip was the Canadian Wildlife Federation. So they invited me up to some seminar they had, and whale watching junket was part of the program. And I got lucky. My first time out whale watching, and I see a great blue whale, and did this painting of him. And then we were at a conference in Washington on the Boreal Forest exhibition. The big sponsor for the Planning Commission, TD Bank, wanted to know if we were going to Alaska. So we went to Alaska. This is the part of Alaska we'll be dealing with right up here. And this was what we did, was over 1,000 miles of paddling over 3 years to circumnavigate the Western Brooks Range. And this is the Noatak River, flows down to Kotzebue. And this is the Kobuk River, also flows sort of to Kotzebue. They both arise right up here at Mount Igikpak, off the glaciers. And let me turn the sound down. Let me mute it. Just imagine you've put thousands of dollars and months of planning into a trip with big time artists on it. And you get there and it's raining so hard, the pilot says, "I'm not sure we can land." So we're buzzing around between these mountainsides in this little de Havilland Beaver, looking for a place to land. And I'm thinking, my trip is done if we can't find a place to land. So I wasn't sure. There wasn't really much of a backup plan except everybody be put off for a week. He had a hell of a, very, very tight flight schedules. So, between weather and other people he need to fly in places, who knows when we'd get in there. But I took these pictures to keep from screaming. So. And we missed the water.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. So that was that trip. Bill broke, we had a 4-man team up exploring Angiak Pass because I knew we were going to go over it to the Kobuk River the next year. So we went up the pass and did a lot of artwork. And this is a studio piece from some of those studies. That's Mount Igikpak from the river. While we were joined by the canoe crew after the first week, and I did a lot of art. The nice thing there is, like, this painting is probably finished at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, there was daylight until, it's crazy. We again spent a lot of time ashore, and so I got a lot of time to do field paintings. This one was a story to it. I did all the organizing for these trips, and we got to Kotzebue, which isn't a big town, and we needed to get flights to Anchorage, and I'd arranged for everybody's flights for Anchorage except mine. And the funding for this trip hadn't hit the bank yet. We did it through Kickstarter and a sponsor, and it hadn't gotten into the bank account yet. I didn't have the money for the flight. I am a working artist, and sometimes I just don't have an extra few $100 sitting in my bank account. And I was stuck at the B&B in Kotzebue. And it turned out the owner says, "Well, hang on, I might have a solution for you." And she brings this big guy in, all in camouflage. It turned out to be the director of the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, who was there for a caribou hunt, and he's an art collector. And he says, "I hear you're an artist. What do you have?" And I laid out all these paintings that I had. And he took a look at this one. He says, "How much?" I said, $250 cash, because that's what I needed for my plane flight. So I got on my plane flight, and I was able to get home. pencil work on the no attack painting. That was a painting on my birthday. We saw bears all over the place, muskox all over the place. It's wolves. It was a 5-week trip in the bush. We got all the way to Kotzebue. Came back in to do the crossing the next year. Everybody bailed on me, so I got the funding for the plane, and I did it by myself. This was the hands down toughest trip I've ever done. I'll short this. It's not all rain. This is flying in nice weather. This is coming into the exact same spot he landed us on the year before, except we came in the other way. And like this time, I'm sitting in the co-pilot seat because I'm the only other person in the plane.
It is 12:19.
It was quite an awesome feeling being being left out by yourself in the middle of that incredible wilderness. If you remember the picture of Bill Brody and me painting, this was me the next day. I got across I put my canoe together and paddled down and started hiking across the Brooks Range, and I went through the route we'd scouted. So I used the same rock to do my first paintings for the trip. And I'll throw this in just for fun.
Let's quit painting. I got I think a fairly nice little piece started, but the wind's died down. It's just nuts trying to get the paint in my face. I can't do anything, so I'm gonna go to bed after 10 anyway. No, gosh, for good gravy. All right. Now with me in here, they're even more excited. I mean, there are thousands of them. This is Alaska the way it's supposed to be, right?
So bugs were a problem at times. I had plenty of time to paint as I went up because I was trying to get myself in condition as I climbed, so I didn't push too hard. This is that glacier I've been keying on the whole time as I got up close to it. Another little, I was using aqua oils for the first time in the field on this trip.
These are the last few steps. I don't have time with the testing delay to do with the other camera, so here we are, arriving at the top. Hey, how's it gonna be? All downhill from here.
Yep, all downhill from there. I had to carry my gear up and I couldn't carry it all at once, so I would go back and forth to get gear. So the 20 miles across the mountain ended up being about 125 miles of walking. It took me I was expecting 10 days. It took 3 weeks. I ran out of food. I had to have an airdrop from the pilot for more food. And once I got to the top of the pass, it really got tough. everything went south. But there I am. The green fool thinks the hard part's done. So I kept painting though until things got really tough, and that became a kind of a survival grind. But it was absolutely gorgeous going through the pass. There's Mount Igapak framed between the paddles of my canoe. That's the folded up canoe. You'll see that in a sec. I got adopted by 2 young black bears for 2 days. I had to sleep with these guys for 2 nights. They actually would curl up a short way from my tarp. I didn't have a tent. I just had a tarp shelter. And it's a little eerie, but I have hundreds of photos of these guys playing with each other and wrestling. And they stole one of my canoe boots, which you'll see the result of later. But there they are. They're a cute pair, probably siblings, probably just their mom had probably just kicked them loose. And they probably just saw me as happily kind of a substitute. Well, we'll hang out with you for a while, see if you're any fun. So they abandoned me after a couple of days. There's what the canoe looked like after I finally got down to the river, could support a boat. And there it is, all rolled out, and there it is, all put together. And this is what happened on my first day of floating.
Came after me. Still smell the cordite.
First grizzly I saw of the trip.
That's kind of the reaction I was hoping for. I put it just past his left ear.
What that means is that white spot you can see right, this is the painting of it. That white spot is where I put the warning round. I had a 45 caliber carbine on the top of my deer pack. And I didn't want to kill the bear. I had a perfectly good kill shot right through his chest. But it's a weird experience. You're going to all sorts of odd places. My brain fractured into several pieces. One was very calm, and it said I had time for 2 shots. And I don't know if that was true, but I decided if it was true, I was going to take a chance that we both went home. And actually, if I'd had a camera, I'd be rich, because it was actually hilarious to watch a 600-pound bear try to come to a dead stop in shallow water. But I didn't, so I had to recreate this after the fact from that video. I saw 6 bears that day. I was a little bit nervous. This is the painting I did of the nicest one I met. That's him right there. That was the guy, you saw him swimming, walking across the river on the last shot. And here's the fish. It's crossing paths is the title of the piece. And I also met these guys later, girls, or I don't know what the calf was. I was very nervous about them because I was in shallow water and very close to them. And mama mooses can be very, very defensive, much more dangerous than grizzlies actually. But I was able to get enough distance out that when she had her ears back when I first showed up, but I backed the canoe away as best I could, and her ears came forward. I mean, she's just more curious. So that's when I relaxed and took the camera out and started just taking pictures. There's a caribou swimming. Not really, but I actually bumped into another paddler once I reached the Kobuk River, a soloist from Germany on a fishing trip, and he took my picture. This is a friend of mine who has a lodge, and he asked me to check on it for him while I was on the Kobuk. And so I did. And this guy, Heinrich, took my picture there. This is the rifle I carried. And that's my campsite. This is my typical camp on the river. I used the rifle to hold it up there, and it also kept it right close to hand if I needed it. I had paddles out and guy lines out. So hopefully a bear would make noise. And basically I just trusted to luck. That's my little breakfast fire. I had a little can there. That's my little camp stove. And all my food had to be in these barrels. So that's a law out there. I had it, so I flew to Kotzebue from Ambler, Alaska. I just had it with all the bears and all the stuff, and I was behind schedule. So I flew in to go home. But that's the Kobuk River Delta. And then 2 years later, we came back to finish it from that. This was that bear I did the painting of. We met him again, same bear. I have the photos to prove it. I couldn't dig them up for this, but we saw 22 bears in 18 days on the Kobuk River, and all of them were nice. We didn't have any bad interactions whatsoever. And the fishing was fantastic. And the bears thought so too. This bear couldn't care less that we were there taking pictures of him. He's just fishing. Much of the weather was very cold and wet, and I luckily enough got some fantastic reference of this very, very disgruntled looking immature bald eagle. And I did a painting of him sitting on the Kobuk River in the rain. And there's one of our crew members with a very happy man with a she-fish. And this is a local doctor in Kiana, Alaska. These are Inupiat villages along the river after the first 110 miles of it. The last 80 miles of the river has got a few villages dotted along it. And when we reached the Chukchi Sea, this is our welcome party. He just was fascinated with the canoe, was playing with us, and it was a little nerve-wracking. The water's only 40 degrees. You have like a 1,100-pound seal bumping the bottom of your boat and trying to play with your paddle. It was cute, but it was a little nerve-wracking. So anyway, in 2016, we went back to the Missinaibi. I'd never been to the Arctic Ocean. I never got to James Bay in all the years. So we went back and we did it again with a small crew. I had a crew of 4. And these are the paintings, some of the paintings I did. Again, we've really focused on artwork on the trip, took our time. This is a nice, I just sit down on the beach as the evening light came in. I set the painting up before the light hit so that I wouldn't have to be drawing this. And as the light got nice, then I painted the light in on top. And there we stayed here for 2 days, and you can see me working on the painting here. And that's the painting. And this is just a little collection of paintings while I was on the beach working on yet another one. So, and we had a young person I think one of the first times we've had a young person on our team, on our crew. And she was the only one who volunteered to jump into the Arctic Ocean when we actually got there. So that's JJ jumping into the Arctic Ocean in James Bay. And we went to this is a stolen boreal forest river, geologically speaking. This is the Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument in Montana. And this is one of the best Western wild landscape painters in the United States, Ralph Oberg. His student, John Potter, he's a Ojibwe and one of my best friends at this point. That's my wife. And these are 2 other artists from the SAA. It's Jan Martin McGuire. Her husband, James, is a photographer. Jan's a painter. So all sorts of good stuff along the river. Haven't done a lot of paintings from it yet. In 2018, we undertook a big one. Our exhibit at the Smithsonian was actually going to finally happen. So Stephen Loring and I decided it was time the 2 lead curators did a big boreal forest trip together. We decided to go across the Ungava Peninsula from Hudson Bay to Ungava Bay. And there was a river and he's, like I said, professional anthropologist. There's a river that's never been surveyed by anthropologists, the Mullen, and had not been paddled 2 times that we know of since 1896, when it was surveyed for the Canadian government by AP Lowe. So we did the Mullen, and it was a wild trip, an absolutely fantastic canoe trip through incredible wilderness. Nobody there. Nobody had been there in many years. The animals, therefore, don't know what people are again, and the bears just look at you. We had a mama bear walk along the shore with us for half a mile with her 2 big cubs. The downside is the portages. There are none. So when you're trying to get over a height of land to find Seal Lake, as is this case, we had to do all sorts of recons looking for the best way to get our gear across. They were beautiful themselves, but this is what the portages could look like. And believe me, that's just as difficult as it looks. However, we were also there to document the presence of freshwater seals on Seal Lake. Hydro-Quebec wanted to turn it into a hydro facility, and they said the seals didn't exist. So we went in there, especially having a Smithsonian scientist with us, gave us some extra cred, and we've got the camera equipment now, just GPS locate everything. So we've got them documented. We documented 4 seals. And this guy actually welcomed us to the lake. That's how long it took to find a seal on Seal Lake. Literally, we broke out of the woods, scouting out the portage, and there he was. And he was not shy at all. I had a drone. There's a funny story. I'm going to try and be fast. I know this is a long show. I was very new to this drone, and the photographer says, "Oh, you should get shots of us." I forgot to put them in, but the drone starts running out of juice, and we're on this big lake, and it has a homing thing where it goes back to where it launched, but it does it by GPS, not by your boat. My boat is moved, so the drone goes back. I almost caught it. I brought it into the boat, and I was reaching up to grab it when it zooms back up to its return home height, which was 60 feet, and took off south on me. And I'm like, oh crap. I had to turn around. I'm going as fast as I could. Long story short, we get there as it's dying, and I landed it on Stephen Loring's lap. All 4 rotors going full blast. But saved the $800 drone, so that was good. Caribou like crazy on the Molez. They would walk right through our camp. It was just, they were everywhere. They're boiling out of the woods. Here's a couple bulls. I'm taking pictures. Steve, our photographer Steve and Stephen Loring. Bulls coming out, checking them out. I was having camera trouble, so Stephen got a nice picture of me with all these caribou sitting right behind me, and I'm fussing with my camera. So. And then there's COVID hits. Well, actually 2019 hit. 2019, I was just exhausted. I decided to take a year off from big expeditions. This is our backyard. This is a plein air painting of our backyard. This is a beaver pond right behind our house. And I built a barn in 2019. So that's laying the foundation. I did it the old fashioned way, post and beam. I cut them with a chisel and a block and the whole bit, and built a barn. So, and that's my beautiful barn. So, but this again, this is the beaver pond right behind our house. This is also a beaver pond up a little bit past our house. This is just hiking in the area. I'm working this theme with, see the spots on the cedar tree. You look at the markings on these birds and you wonder, where does that come from? You start to put them in their environment and you start to realize it makes sense. This animal actually blends in quite nicely, as does the weasel. The markings on these flickers go right with sapsucker holes. I should have probably done a bit more of that. These again are within a 15-minute walk of the house. One of my first nocturne, that's Champlain Valley. And this was a rabbit who's disappeared stage right. Snowy owl, long-eared owl. And this was literally, I can see where this is from where I'm sitting right now. This is at the south end of our pond. Barred owls were quite common around here. And this is a marsh wren. And this was the first ringneck duck I ever saw in Preston Pond. That was in migration a couple of years ago. And these guys were fun. When the ice is thin, these guys were playing pop-up. It was like whack-a-mole. I was trying to get photos of them, but they would pop up and they back down. There were 3 of them. And they just kept breaking through the ice, looking at me and then popping back down. I couldn't get a shot of them, but I stuck with it and I finally did. And I got this painting out of it. And of course, it's a beaver pond. I've just sold this piece. As I've always loved it. This didn't appeal to a lot of people. I guess my wife says it's too green, but I liked it. It's a beaver the way you see beavers. And this beaver knew who I was, so I got great reference on them. They're quite intelligent. They get to recognize you if you hang around with them long enough. This is also the pond behind our house. Bullfrogs and plein air. I was getting ready for a long trail trip in 2020. Of course, COVID closed everything down. I did not anticipate, taking 2019 off was not the end of my canoeing career as I envisioned it. I just thought, the 2018 trip had been so exhausting to organize and fund that the doing of it was the easy part. I was going to take 2019 off, and then 2020 hit, and I couldn't go to Canada. So I was going to do the long trail end to end as a painting trip, and to kind of get back into the plein air I started doing, this is our pond. Our house is actually right past those leaves. So that's the start of the long trail. This is my first painting at Shooting Star Shelter. Went from north south. There's the painting. There's the guy who bought it on the first morning I was on the trail. I was off to a good start. These are all little plein airs. And we did it as a fundraiser for the Green Mountain Club and for the Vermont Wildlife Coalition, which I'm the chair of the board. And we raised, surprisingly, I thought it was just gonna be a nice way to make a little extra money and have a nice fun hike. Actually raised quite a lot of money. So we did very well. I don't know if I'm gonna bother with this. This is the news. The news covered it a lot. You can just Google it. You'll see all the, this is the painting that I did on camera for NBC. That was that last bit, if you look that up. And when you have to paint on camera, it's like being Bob Ross, except I'm not Bob Ross, and I was afraid it would bomb, but it actually came out well. And there's me at the southern end of the hike. So fast forward to last year, and I wanted to keep going. It was so successful that I wanted to do something else. And I decided to do Lake Champlain, but all I have is canoes. So I figured I needed a boat. And we went look. I just spent the winter looking for boats on the internet, and I found this one at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. It's a small canoe. It's called a canoe yawl because it's 2 masts, but canoe shape, which I thought was very appropriate for me. My first sailboat is a canoe yawl. That's the sailplane. So there's in our driveway being totally sanded down and worked on. There's my wife working on it. It was a total team effort. She pitched right in. And there she is as we got her all painted up. She's not launched yet. And there I am painting and boarded on Burton Island last summer. And of course, did my lettering thing. I designed the logo for it. And that was the project that Beth Seitler was one of the artists. We had 8 artists involved in this that came on board or joined me at various islands for periods of time. I sailed the lake by myself, essentially. Beth helped me get the boat down to the south end. Sailing north, I did the entire sail alone. This is on Valcour Island, Smuggler's Cove. It's supposed to be the best sunrises on Lake Champlain, and I can't argue. This loon actually did show up. He showed up just before the sun came up, so it's a little artistic license putting him in with the sunrise. And that goes to a commission piece I'm working on now. This was the first plein air piece. I'd sailed all the way down to Whitehall. This was I was moored on the Poultney River, which is right on the Vermont-New York line. And this is the absolute start of Lake Champlain in Vermont right here. And so I spent the night there and I got up and listened to the 4th of July fireworks down Whitehall, which was only a mile away. And then I painted this in the morning and then I set off north. This is one of my plein airs from Valcour. And this is also Valcour. This is my favorite plein air painting of the whole trip. The water right in here, there's no sweet spots. I got lucky. I got chased out of here by a huge thunderstorm, the most severe storm I've ever been outside in. And I did it in my poor little boat. We were anchored. And this is a studio piece from Burton Island. I just love a lot of people don't like snakes. I do. But I also like artistically, I like the repeated colors and forms, the way this snake just fits into this environment. And this was the big piece de resistance of the trip. That piece is, yeah, that's I've gone to a collector now. So this is the last to leave. It's the little eaglet here. They're coming in with no food, trying to encourage him to get the heck out of Dodge. And that's the end of the trip, end of it so far. So with that, how over time am I? Only
About
14
15 minutes.
Only 14 minutes, not bad.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was so interesting. There's so many trips.
Well, this is, like I said, editing is, I'm not a good editor. I could probably, with a little more time, shorten that down a lot, but I've done over 30 wilderness trips. So, it's, and some of them weren't all that exciting, but most of them, they've all got stories, and like there's, what are you gonna do? It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, that was all it was all really cool to see. Yeah, 30 trips. I'm amazed that you can like remember them all so distinctly.
well, they're all connected to stories, and that's how people remember things. So to me, they're just story after story after story. And this, I mean, each one of them, honestly, if you look at the sorts of things you look at, the outfitters will put together for you, each one of them is a trip of a lifetime for many people. And I've had the good fortune, then they didn't end up, the Canadian ones have not to date ended up being a big financial payoff. You know, they've kept me limping along. The Vermont ones, ironically, have just made my career take off at this late date. It's just kind of crazy. So I should have stayed home.
Yeah, people love Vermont.
It's a funny lesson, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, oh, go ahead.
No, I think I'm talked out. I think we finally did it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming.
My wife can't believe it. She's going, what? That's impossible, she said.
Yeah, so before we go, is there anywhere that you want to point people to see more of or purchase your work?
Oh, well, robmullen.com is my website. It's fairly simple. Or you can go to the Robert Paul Gallery in Stowe, Vermont. He doesn't have much at the moment. Okay, well, I've got to resupply him, but I'm working on that. And the other things, we do have the Smithsonian shows coming together, but I can't announce that. That's up to the Smithsonian to announce. It's evolved a lot from what we originally set it out to be, but there will be a book which encompasses a lot of these expeditions will be, and that may be part of the exhibit, but will be coming out one way or the other. But that's, again, nothing people can go look at right now until it's out. Right now, it's just my website. And I don't even maintain that very well. There's not a lot. There's not like a page of artwork available for sale. It's just contact. You know, it's like if you like what you see and you like something along those lines, you can drop me a line. And if Bob doesn't have anything over in Stowe that suits you, just see what I've got on hand. Or like right now, I'm swamped on commissions. And I do them very loosely. And somebody said, well, I would like a loon. Well, I paint the loon the way I want to paint the loon, but I'll paint the species that you're interested in, and within reason, I'll accommodate. I don't want too much art direction generally, but I'm not an unreasonable sort.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the Smithsonian stuff when it comes out. That sounds really exciting.
It's probably not going to have a lot of artwork in it, as it turns out. It's like I said, it's moved in it's a very, very long story, longer than this presentation. So
well, no worries. Thank you so much. It was great to meet you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good meeting you. And thanks for inviting me on. That was fun.
Absolutely. Happy to have you.
All right. Take it easy.
You too.